Welcome back. We continue with our focus on protest-hit Zimbabwe. Demonstrations erupted after the fuel price was more than doubled last weekend. A number of Zimbabweans have been jumping the border to buy fuel and other basic necessities in Musina. Now, to help us unpack developments in our neighbouring state, we're joined by Dr. Zenzo Moyo from the University of Johannesburg. Thank you very much for coming through this afternoon. We know the fuel price hike is what sparked this protest, but there's been some discontent in Zimbabwe for some time, hasn't there?
Yes, that's very true. In fact, this is something that began quite long back, and the fuel price increase that was announced on Saturday by the president is just but a spark. But this problem has been coming for a very long time, so it's just a time bomb that has been waiting.
What has the discontent also been about?
Well, it has been about the political turmoil that is in Zimbabwe, the contested electoral results that were announced in August last year. It is also about the economic crisis, shortage of basic commodities and the price hikes, the level of inflation, all that stuff has been affecting citizens in Zimbabwe.
Earlier on this channel, we had a member of ZANU-PF in South Africa talking about the protests, saying that this kind of violence and destruction isn't really what Zimbabweans do. This is not their kind of behavior. So, I mean, in South Africa, we often have violent protests, so we're quite well versed in what this looks like. But is this sort of protest action unusual for Zimbabwe?
Well, I think it's correct that Zimbabweans are naturally not violent people. But the problem that we have is that, you know, poor people only have demonstrations and mass action as their only source of weapon. They have nothing else to do. And remember, these people are going into the streets hungry and they have nothing to eat. So even if looting is not really something that can be encouraged, you can actually understand why they are doing it. Because it is from the environment in which they are at the moment, which they find themselves in, that is actually forcing them to do things that they've never done before. So it is actually something that is wrong, but not surprising that it is happening.
Let's take a look at the government's response to this. It's been slammed as being very hard-handed and maybe a bit oppressive. What's your take on the way that the government has been dealing with this issue?
Indeed, I think it is heavy-handed, it is uncalled for, and I think the problem is that the government really wants to send a message to try and stop any further demonstrations or future demonstrations. So this is a way of trying to intimidate people so that next time when either opposition parties or labor movements, civil society organizations call people to the street, people should be scared. I mean, this is a tactic and a strategy that they've always used all the time to try and stop people from demonstrating, and clearly there is something that they fear, and it is likely to come, whether they delay it now or in the future, but it might come, as long as things are not corrected.
But surely the optics are really bad. I mean, earlier that same ZANU-PF official was saying, no, this is embarrassing for Zimbabwe. But surely the response by the government could be seen as just as embarrassing.
But what can be more embarrassing than spending your Christmas holidays queuing in a fuel queue, going to a shop and you can't even afford to buy what is in the shops? That is even more embarrassing. People going out into the streets is what is expected. People can go, if you are dissatisfied with something, you have that right to get into the street and demonstrate so that you can show the government that you are not happy about what is happening. What is embarrassing is the way the people in Zimbabwe are being governed. And I think it is high time that the people in Zimbabwe should actually come out and demonstrate that they are not happy about it. And such kind of talk, you can actually sense that it is spoken simply because people are being taken for granted, and people in Zimbabwe have been taken for granted for a long time, and they are now showing that we are also people and we can also think, and this is why they are now coming out into the streets to demonstrate.
What could happen next? What's your feeling about what is coming?
Well, we have been told that the stairway will continue next week, but I think it is a very difficult thing to sustain, especially if you don't have a nucleus that is leading the demonstrations. You would need a nucleus that is going to accommodate and communicate with people and lead the process. So at the moment, civil society leaders are being arrested, and that is done deliberately so that you destroy this order. And if there is no order and there is no coordination, it becomes very difficult to operate. More so when it comes to even shutting down the internet. How then are you able to communicate and arrange whatever you want to arrange? So at the end of the day, the intention is to make it unsustainable for the strike to go on, and this is what the government is trying to do.
That's University of Johannesburg Development Studies researcher Dr. Zenzo Moyo.